Welcome to the Strong, Single and Human podcast, a real look at single parenting, how to navigate the ups and downs of life with kids on your own while keeping sane. We cover all manner of subjects from domestic violence, dealing with childhood trauma, through to fussy eaters and how to help your kids become resilient. I'm your host, Claire Martin. Welcome. Hailing from Canada, Kresina is the parent of 2 small children and a financial educator who works in the financial technology sector. Her love of personal finance, parenthood and technology is apparent in both the content she creates, documenting her journey to financial independence. She is the co-host of 2 of Australia's leading podcasts, Get Rich Slow Club and ETFs for Beginners, and has been featured in the ABC, the Australian Finance Review, AusBiz, and the Girls That Invest podcast, and more. In her free time, she loves to adventure, spend time with family, and play board games. She's travelled to over 50 plus countries and now calls Australia her home. She has also just become a published author with the book Kids Ain't Cheap. This is the Strong, Single and Human podcast. Hi, Kresina. How are you? Welcome to the podcast.
I'm doing well. How are you?
All right, not too bad. Having one of those days, but that's okay. We will get through this. It's all good. It's okay. Can't wait to go to bed, go to sleep, and have a new day tomorrow. But cool. Look, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about finances. Oh my good golly, money, right? And how you got into dealing with finances, because you've got a book that goes, Kids Ain't Cheap, because they ain't. And we all know that, right? And so tell us, I've explained a little bit in the intro, but tell us, like, what made you write a book called Kids Ain't Cheap?
Yeah, great question. I was actually at a book launch and I was hanging out with a couple authors, and I met this author that I was joking around with, being like, oh, you're a big shot author now. You wrote your book. And he's like, honestly, anyone can write a book. In fact, you've been talking quite a bit about finances and kids on social media. You could do the same. And I'm like, yeah, well, there are absolutely no resources for people who are considering parenthood. What that does on your finances, you're in many cases, parents are taking some parental leave, they're losing income, but their expenses go up. And that doesn't really exist. Like, there's bits and pieces that get discussed in that space, but not holistically, not about things like the childcare subsidy, things that you need to consider for getting paid parental leave through the government. Like, all these little bits and pieces exist, but they're not all in one resource. So he introduced me to his publisher, and I kind of pitched the idea, and she was like, great, let's do it. I was on parental leave with my second child at the time, sleep deprived, horrible mental health situation, had some family drama happen back in Canada, but I managed to do it because I felt that it was such a niche area and a space that really needed resources. So hence Kids Ain't Cheap, and that came to be.
And you've also got another book as well. It's like you didn't just stop at the one, did you? You've got another one.
Yeah, I have another one coming out now, and it's called How to Not Work Forever. And that's also on finances as well. So Kids Ain't Cheap is more focused on the parental kind of side of it. And then How to Not Work Forever is literally, if you've ever read The Barefoot Investor and you're like, okay, I've got my debt under control, I know what to do, what's the next step that I can do? And How to Not Work Forever is literally that, because it's about how to invest, how your money makes money, and how you can build a life you love. And often that comes down to building wealth.
Yeah, and my son, I have to say, God love him, my son can't get over the fact that you can put money into somewhere and you get more money out sometimes. Yes. Sometimes, right? I've had to educate him and go, sometimes it doesn't work quite that way. You've got to invest for the long term, buddy. But yeah, usually the long term wise, you get some money out.
Yeah. So. And that's something that I think when I was younger, that didn't get talked about enough, right? In a
No.
lot of cases, and especially for women, it's discussed that savings is the right way, cutting down expenses. But often, historically, men have been told about building wealth, whether that be through property or investing. And one of my missions is actually to help and educate around the financial side of it. So going back to your money making money, for those people who are less familiar with that concept, the idea is that you can invest your money in specific assets. And hopefully the idea is over the long term, those assets will grow in value. And if you're located in Australia, you're already invested if you hold a super fund. So if the government thinks that it's a pretty good idea for your retirement, it might be something to consider. So there's a couple different ways that parents or anyone, kids, your son and so forth, can invest. And that is through things like property, bonds, shares, ETFs. And for people who are like, I don't know what any of those are different type of asset classes that someone can invest in. And ETFs is something that gets discussed quite a bit. So what is that? That's an exchange traded fund. So it's literally a fund of shares that is traded on the exchange. So instead of deciding to buy an individual company, you can buy a bunch of them, which makes it a bit cheaper because you're following an index. So instead of picking the winners and discussing which ones are losers, you're buying kind of all of them. And often a lot of super funds are following various indexes around that as well. So that's just the quickest Cole notes on what investing kind of is for those people, since we've already started talking about it.
I need this book. I'm getting this book. No, but that's true, right? And so yeah, the EFTs are, you're investing in a group of companies, right? So a couple might not do so well, but a couple might be like storming ahead and doing fantastically, and then you'll have some middle of the road ones, right? So it sort of spreads your risk, doesn't it?
It does.
But we're not giving financial advice or telling you what to do on this podcast.
Consider if it's right for you. Yeah.
Yes. Go and speak to somebody a bit more qualified than I am, or go and read Anna's book. And then go and speak to somebody qualified. I don't know if you've got caveats in your book. I'm not sure. But
yes. Lots of disclaimers. So it's definitely worth talking to a financial advisor or even a tax accountant. Yeah. Those people can really help you manage some of your risk and understanding and strategizing around that, because especially for parents, and which I discuss in my first book, there's a lot of planning that might come with having a family, and talking to professionals can be really beneficial because they're able to tailor it to your specific needs.
Yes, no, exactly right. There we go. All the caveats done and dusted and out of the way. But it's true, right? At the end of the day, if you can, even if you can put $10 away somewhere a week, and then, reap the benefits in 2 or 3 years' time or whatever, happy days, right? And you've got money for free, sort of. But yeah. See, we just jinx. That's what it is, right? Turning the phone off. What are some of them? We'll get right into the crux of it, right? So I know Kids Ain't Cheap, right? Your first book was written really around parenting, right? And what you need to think about when you become a parent, or what you need to think about when you've got like one child and you're getting another child, because it's an expensive old business, right? These kiddies. And I'm not sure, I think with everything, right? I'm not sure we actually understand. We have this idealistic view of what it's like, right? It'll be great. They'll listen to me. I'll be able to teach them all the knowledge I've got. It will be fab. And we'll look like those families on the adverts that like are sitting around having breakfast together. Oh my God. Let me put it this way, right? We all know if we've got kids, I ain't like that at all, right? In briefest of moments, you might get that, but not all the time. Oh my God. And if you'd have seen what my morning's been like with 3 children, it's been great. So what are some of the common expenses that people might overlook when they're like budgeting for life-changing events, budgeting for parenting, basically?
Yeah. I mean, So some of the, like parenting is a long
Oh my
journey, as
God.
we know. And in fact, kids cost about $500,000 to raise to the age of 18. That's
Oh my
probably a bit higher
God.
with inflation. So that's a lot of money
I
that
feel
you
like
need
it's
to put
been
away.
like that already.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And in the research that I found is kids get more expensive as they get older. So that was the one where I was like, are you kidding me? Because I have kids in early
Yeah.
childhood education and care. That is the equivalent of my
Oh,
previous rent. I could not imagine that they get
yeah.
more expensive. The only thing is it just gets a bit more dispersed out. So some of the biggest costs right off the bat is for a lot of parents, if they're expecting, they have to kind of kit out their space, get diapers, get furniture, get clothes. So that's a big one. That's around 10K in that very first year in a lot of cases, somewhere between 5 to 10K depending on what name brands you're buying. But
Oh my gosh.
nonetheless,
Yeah.
it's a huge amount. And then eventually when parents go back to work in whatever capacity, they're often have a reduced income that comes in. This is something that doesn't get discussed enough.
Yeah.
Reducing your income, taking paid parental leave, that can extremely impact your earning capacity in the future, your ability to your career trajectory and your growth, and then of course your retirement savings. If you're not working, you're not having money put into your super. And as we've
Yes.
seen is that women over 55 are the largest cohort of homelessness and of poverty. And a lot of that has to do with a lot of women having to take time out of the workforce in order to take on caring duties. Now, so that's something that doesn't get discussed enough, just the earning capacity, especially if you're in a single parent household, that can have
Yeah.
a huge impact because when you're looking at double income households, there's often a bit of a buffer. Now, so that's a huge loss in income. And then the expenses that come is if you are putting kids in early childhood education and care, prefer that term over childcare just because
Yeah.
they're not being only cared for. There's a lot of education that happens there,
There
and it's a
is.
disservice to the educators who are doing such a phenomenal job. Now, the thing is, that's a huge cost as well. And for parents who want to work, that's just something that they need to consider when they're weighing the pros and cons. And there's a lot of challenges around how many hours are allocated to you based on other government requirements like activity test or your family income. So it's really important to kind of understand how that works and have a whole chapter on that because it is so complex. And anyone who's gone through that
Yeah.
system has most likely talked to an educator or whoever runs the center and be like, can you explain to me why I'm paying for a full day if my kid's in for 5 days? And chances are it really depends on how many hours of operation the center's at. So it's quite complex. So that's a
Exactly.
caveat for those early years. Now, as they're going on into older years, school years, depending
Yeah.
on if you want your child to go to a public school or a private school, there are fees that are associated with that. There's everything from like books, excursions, activities. Everyone wants to put their kids into sports or or
And
dance or
well,
get a tutor.
and
Mhm.
this is the thing, right? When you look at going to private schools and stuff like that, right? You've got to consider, right? There isn't just the fees, right? So it could be 20,000 a year, right? That's not where it stops. And you go, right, I've paid my money.
Yeah.
This is good, right? There are excursions, right? There are books. There are things that you're requested to contribute to, um, that aren't included in the fees, right? So
No.
yeah,
And they
that's
contribute time. I always
yeah,
am blown away by this. It's like you're expected to come in at this time, so you have to take time off work, and that has a huge effect not only on your income but also on your mental health in terms of
yeah.
juggling work, children, and school. And of course, we always want to be very present parents, but it you realize how little the system is set up for life now as we know it, right?
Yeah. Very
Unfortunately.
much so. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think I might be one of the only people who was glad about COVID actually hitting and us
Mhm.
having to work from home because I think nowadays, although the pendulum is slightly changing, but nowadays most companies are work we're in the office 3 days and you can work from home too, right? Which is sort of doable, right? Because then you're not paying for before or after school care.
Mhm.
If you're working from home, you can and you're able to go and pick your children up and then have them at home while you're still working and things like that. So Yeah. There's
The
sort of
biggest winners
swings and
during
roundabouts.
COVID have been parents,
Yeah.
specifically mothers in many cases, because that wasn't an opportunity before. So being able to work from
No.
home, being closer to childcare or school or whatever it might be, made it such much more manageable. And actually, we've seen, I think, is more parents wanting more flexible hours or working from
Yeah.
home and so forth. And hopefully that continues on. I know there's a big push to get people back in the office, but I
No.
completely agree with you. I think that has been a game changer for so many people.
Yes. I must admit, like, oh, well, I know we're going slightly off topic, but I must admit it's quite funny because even when you're in the office, depending on how many people you have in the meeting, right, you're still sitting on a Teams meeting anyway, right?
Mhm.
So you're still sitting on a virtual meeting, talking to people because they're at home, and so it's just a little bit all over the place. But it just means that we're like moving into a new era. People, we need to get with it. Need to
Indeed.
get with it, right? Get with it and deal with it. So that's okay. That's fine. So, like, but also, like you mentioned, right? Sport.
Mhm.
Like, you've then got, I pay, there's nothing associated with my son's school, right? So I pay for soccer and football and swimming lessons and anything else he wants to deal with outside of school as well. So, and
Yeah.
they can be hefty costs as well, right?
And in many cases, they increase as the kid grows as well. I know gymnastics, for example, gets more
Oh my
expensive over
God.
time. Same
Soccer
with some
does
of these
too.
other sports, you know. So it is something that, of course, parents need to take into consideration. You know, it's not just
Yeah.
the first year and you're like, oh, it's so expensive with early childhood costs. No, it gets more expensive. You just don't see
Yeah.
it in a continuously weekly expense.
No.
Mm.
So, okay, so what strategies can we put in place? What can we do
Yeah.
to actually not find ourselves in a whole massive mess where we're going, oh my God, the kid's got to go into school camp, kid camp, school camp, in a couple of months, and then it's going to cost me like $500, something like
Yes.
that, right? So
So
how do we do that?
one of the best ways to do that is actually like think about your money. And you know, I think it's really important to first off start with just tracking your money. What are you currently spending your money on? Where is it going?
Mm,
Where is it being allocated? Like anything in life, if you don't track it, you can't change it, you can't be aware of it. So tracking your money now, where it's going, whether it's you're going towards wants and needs or just understanding your cash flow. A lot of parents are very tight. You know, having kids is sometimes the hardest time financially in your life because you have dependents, you have massive expenses. So just tracking your money and understanding your cash flow and then allocating a system for yourself that works. So there's a lot of different ways to budget your money. There's tons of budgeting apps that are really fantastic. You can also do the bucket based one where it's kind of percentage wise. There's different ways that you can budget your money. And it doesn't have to be boring. A lot of people think, oh, budgeting money is so boring. The way I like to think about it is it's giving your money a job, knowing exactly where each dollar is going instead of wondering where it went. So if
yeah.
you can think about money that way, that's a really great way to kind of set it up. So once you have tracked your money, you see where it's going, you are setting up a system so that you can put some money aside, and that's another part. So the third piece of that would be making sure you have some money aside. An emergency fund is really important. So having somewhere between 3 to 6 months of expenses in case something were to happen to
Wow.
you. So if you were to get sick or you know, you had to spend money because something happened with your roof or your car broke down, having an emergency fund is really important. And 3 to 6 months of expenses may seem really large, but starting even just small with trying to get to $1,000 and then building on that is going to kind of help you out in the case of those emergencies.
And can you, with those, because that I agree with you, having an emergency fund is so important. Single parents, couples, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Because you do have that time where you go, oh my God, you take your car, something happens to your car, and then you've got to get it towed to a garage and
Yep.
it's going to get fixed, and it could be like $3,000, $4,000, right? And
Yeah.
if you've not got the money, you put in it on a credit card, and that's just, and then you've got something else to worry about, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I wanted to ask, right? Now, that emergency fund, you can invest it can't you? But it's an emergency fund. So you need to be able to withdraw it. You can't like have it squirreled away in some investments fund that means you can't remove it for the next 5 years or whatever, right?
Yeah.
You can invest it, but you don't have to just keep it in the bank. But
it would
you
be,
said before,
I
speak
would
to people
actually
about it.
caveat that it's not advantageous to invest it because the share market is volatile. And what ends up happening is usually if you're investing, you want to invest for long term, and long term is considered 7+ years.
Yes.
And you never know when an emergency is going to hit. So if the market, for example, does dip
crashes
a bit and you do need that money, that $5,000 that you had invested might actually be quote unquote worth $3,000. But you need to pull it at that time because it's an emergency. So you can't wait for the volatility to go up and down. So with emergency funds, you want to put it in usually a defensive asset is what it's called without getting too much.
So like a savings account that gets you 5% or whatever. So you haven't got it in a bank account that's just sitting there, no interest, right? You've actually got it somewhere where but it's safe, right? So it's hopefully just going to creep up and not creep down as well, right?
Exactly.
But again, talk to somebody who can help you out with all of this because there's so many different schemes out there. But
yeah. So an emergency fund, you ideally want to have it in cash, hopefully in a high interest savings account. At the moment, interest rates are quite high. So that's fantastic. They might dip again. Interest rates are somewhere between 1% to 5%. So at the moment, so it is worth shopping around and looking around and seeing what is right for you. Because a lot of these accounts also have specific rules around it. Like you have to pull your money out or you have to deposit a certain amount every time. So find something that works for you, but it is worth looking into because again, we're talking about building wealth. We want our money to make money. And even though historically investing over the long term can make your returns higher than in a savings account, in the case of an emergency fund, we want to make sure that it is absolutely safe, that it's not going to dip because we might need it shorter than 7 years.
Exactly right.
But you're totally right. It is worth looking around for a saving account. And then the one thing that I didn't mention, is if you have debt, consumer debt, credit card debt, that is worth paying down as well, because just like your money growing in a savings account, your debt can also grow based on those interest rates. So that's another really, really important thing, making sure you have an emergency fund, but also trying to pay down that debt, because in the case of an emergency, if you're using your credit card, you might be racking up more debt and be worse off in the future than if you had an emergency fund. So that's a really big, important part of it. And then once you've kind of gotten your money management, cash flow, your savings, your emergency savings, you've paid off debt, there are other things that you can do, such as considering investing, considering contributing to your super. There's other things that you can do, considering buying property. Those are other things that you can do to build your wealth. But in a lot of cases, that comes after the fact, right?
Yeah. That's after you've got your emergency fund, you've paid down your credit cards, because at the end of the day, having those debts there, credit card bills and stuff like that are there, right? They're actually, it's probably better because of the high interest rates associated with credit cards and things like that you pay those off first before you invest anything, because you're just paying off the interest on that, which means you're like paying sometimes it can be up to 20% more, is it more than that?
Yeah. So for context, to your point, exactly, savings accounts can be somewhere between 1% to 5% at the moment. Credit cards can be somewhere between 17 to 21%. So that's huge. And investing for the long term is usually somewhere between 6 to 9%. So for context, that's kind of, if you're not paying off your debt, you are going to definitely get swamped with debt in the future. It'll just grow. Yeah,
exactly. So instead of actually investing, it's best to pay that off, because it's costing you 20%. So if you've got $1,000, right, it's 20% of $1,000 that it's costing you to pay it back, right? So just get it cleared first and go from there. But no financial advice here.
Yeah. But the other thing I was going to add that people don't think about quite a bit, because some people are eager to invest, right? Like there's a FOMO around investing. The other way to think about debt is if you're paying off your debt, you are saving yourself money in the long run, right? You're saving yourself money because now you're not going to have to pay that off. You're saving money. But if you're investing, you're still going to have to pay tax on dividends, which is an income that you might get from your investments. So you would have to do the math on exactly how much money you're making because you're going to have to also pay tax on what's coming in on that. Or if you sell those shares or ETFs, you will have to pay tax on that. So there's two ways to pay taxes. It's on either
Capital
dividends or
gains
selling them.
tax.
Yeah. And
Bane of everybody's lives. Like, you've worked very hard for your money, you invest it, you make money on it, and then like you're being taxed on your income and then your capital gain on your investment.
Yes.
So look, like you said at the beginning, right? It's a good idea to go and get some financial advice, speak to an accountant, et cetera, et cetera. There are various things that you think you might be doing that's going to get you money. And then you actually find out that, hang on a minute, you're going to be taxed and then you're going to be taxed again or whatever. And maybe you need to set it up a different way so that it isn't the case.
I'll give you an example of something that happened to me, actually. So obviously I work in the finance industry. I feel like I know my finances quite well. I ended up having a couple shares that I wanted to sell because I was purchasing my first home. And I thought, how great, I'm going to sell these shares. I've held them for over 12 months. So my capital gains tax is only 50%,
less,
which
50%.
is, it's a bit less. Fantastic. But what it did was increased my taxable income quite high for that 1 year. And because of that, I didn't get paid parental leave because I was outside of the bracket. And I had to pay full childcare and I didn't get any subsidy on that. And that was only for the 1 year, for that exactly 1 year when I was expecting my second child. Had it been any other year, it wouldn't have been a thing. And again, I'm speaking from a place of privilege. I'm very fortunate to be in a space where I had shares that I was able to sell. I know that's not always the case, but had I talked to an accountant, had I done a little bit more tax planning, and this is why I thought it was so important to write Kids Ain't Cheap, because so many people might have an apartment or something. They're like, I'm going to upgrade, I'm going to sell this. And they might do it the exact 1 year where it doesn't allow them to get any subsidies. It doesn't allow them to get any government support. And in fact, when I did the math, I nullified all of that, what I did. I wish I didn't do that, but had I known, so it goes back to, it's really important to talk to someone who can actually give you personalized advice.
Yeah. And sit and look at the options about what you can do and when you should do it and various different things like that. But no, I agree. It's, this finance thing is a confusing place to be. So that's okay. That's cool. It's fine. So sort your budgets out first, I think, is what we're saying. We're basically saying, understand what's going out, what's coming in, what you can maybe do without if money is tight. So i.e., if you're going to work and then buying lunch at work, that could be $15 every day or $10 every day. But over a 5-day week, that's $50. Over a month, that's $200, right?
Yep.
Whereas you might, if you made your lunch at home and took your lunch, even if you had 1 day a week where you went and splashed out and got lunch, but the other 4, you're saving $160, $160, people, a month, which could go towards something else.
For sure.
Paying off a debt or investing or
swimming lessons,
or even just taking your child away for the night, right?
Yeah.
And going and
100%.
having a mini holiday, right? So yeah, I have to agree with you. It's definitely when you actually look at and when you do your budgeting and you look at, but I only have a couple of takeout coffees a day, right? That's, if they're $6.50, that's $12.50. My maths is rubbish. $13 a day. That's quite a bit if you're doing it every day, right? By all means, treat yourself. But if money's tight, you really got to consider what is going on and what you can afford, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's cool. So should we be considering, so that's savings and money and budgets, right? But are there other things that we need to consider as parents, right? Because I'm thinking, and I'm going down the dark route, but wills, I'm
Mm-hmm.
considering insurance for if you can't
Mm-hmm.
work, or health insurances, things like that. Like, are there other things that you should be including in your budgets
Yeah.
that maybe people haven't thought about?
100%. So will is a big one. It's actually surprising how little people have a will and have children. And this is really
Yeah.
important because you want to make sure that your child is set up in a way if you were to pass. And I don't think it's a morbid thing at all. I know some people don't want to think about their death, but if you don't want to think about your death, think about how you can support your child and what are all the
Yeah.
different ways that you can do it. So having a will is really important. Having a child protection plan. Who's going to look after your child? What kind of values do you want for them? Is there a note or a letter that you'd like to leave them in the case something were to suddenly happen? These are all really important things for your child, and just being able to talk to that person. If it's a family member or a friend that might look after guardianship of your child, making sure that they're prepared and know that
Yeah.
they're written down, and talk to your child about that as well, just to have a plan. Another thing is having a binding financial agreement, also known as a prenup, in the case that you are partnering or talking to someone that you want to. This is really important to talk to a lawyer about this, because just writing
Yes.
it down on a napkin is not going to
No.
suffice here. But it is important to talk to someone, get that all down in writing, because if you, for example, own property or any type of assets, and something were to happen with your partnership, you want to make sure that your children are protected. So that's really important.
Yeah.
Checking your insurances in the case of disability or death or any of that stuff. A lot of that is in your super, but it is worth talking to a financial advisor for anything outside of that, like trauma. That's a really big one. You see a lot of people who potentially get illnesses like cancer, and they want to make
Yeah.
sure that
Critical illness.
yeah, they want to make
Yeah.
sure that their kids are going to be okay. So this is like a massive checklist of things. And then if you want to go further down the line as well, like having advanced directives in the case that something were to happen to you, so your kids know exactly what to do. A lot of us who are parents, we might be experiencing that with our parents. I'm having those conversations with my family in
Mm.
terms of what were to happen, but that can just as happen to younger people as well. So having that in place, a power of attorney might be something to consider as well. So if you can't make financial decisions for yourself, who would do that so that your child's life isn't interrupted?
Yeah.
So those are all just like some really important things to consider, to just tick off the list and get them done one at a time. Because like for me, I often think of mental health, and for me, mental health is all about my admin work.
Yeah.
Is my house in order in terms of the admin of my family? So for me, I think that those things are really important, because I don't know what's going to happen to me tomorrow. I could easily just get in a car accident, and then what? So I would say that those things are massively on a to-do list, and just tick them off.
Yeah. And I have to agree. Don't put this off. Think about it and do it. Do it now. Do it as soon as you can, right? Because we don't know when our numbers are up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we're both in Australia, right? And
Yeah.
good old Shane Warne was what, 53 when he died, or whatever age it was, 52, something like that, right? That's no age, right? And he wasn't expecting to go. And I mentioned him just because he's a famous person, right? Who we
Mm-hmm.
thought, nothing would happen to, right?
Yeah.
Just the same as I'll just go through every dead person now, but just the same as like Lisa Marie Presley,
Mm-hmm.
Michael Jackson. Let's not keep it to Australia. George Michael in the UK, right?
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
was in his 50s. But like at the end of the day, people can die in their 20s, in their 30s, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a horrible thing to talk about, but it happens, right? And I know people who have young children,
Yeah.
4 and 6, who didn't expect to get ill and die, but they did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's then just about figuring that out. And at my age, and I'm old, consider a power of attorney, right? I might lose my marbles in a couple of years. I might have dementia or whatever. And if I do, and I don't have a power of attorney, I'm not deemed as being in a fit state to actually
Yeah.
make decisions. So who then makes
Mm-hmm.
decisions for me?
Yeah.
God
Yeah.
knows. So,
Well, those things are all so important. And especially, for example, for single parents as well, making
yes.
sure that you know who your kid is going to end up with, having that
Yeah.
child protection plan. If you've had an abusive partner or someone that you absolutely do not want your kids to be with,
Yeah.
well, you need to get it down in writing. That's so
Yeah.
important.
In a will, get it signed, get it witnessed,
Yeah.
and get it sorted. But yes. Wow. Is there a happier subject we can talk about?
Yeah, there's lots of happy
Let's
subjects.
talk about some more happy
We can
subjects.
we can talk about the great ways that you can talk to your kids about money.
Yes.
So kids absolutely pick up a lot from their parents, a lot of actions as we see. Now, because currency has become much more digital than it has physical,
Mm.
it's really important for us to also just kind of showcase money as well. So kids around 3, 4 years old know how to count. By the age of 7, they already have basic understanding of delayed gratification, budgeting, and spending. So they're already picking up some of those things. As your kids get older, there's a lot of things that we as parents can showcase them in terms of money, bringing them along to the shops, talking about the value of something. Asking them, if your kids are a bit older, asking them to budget a dinner plan. This is how much money you have. Can you actually purchase all that? How much does it cost? Now it's going to be a lot of money because we
Yeah.
know how expensive the
Oh
the
my God,
supermarkets
don't go
are.
there. Yeah.
But it is a way for kids to kind of get involved, and we want to empower them to make those decisions. Now, a lot of parents talk about allowances as well and giving money to kids, and that's obviously a personal choice. But the big one around that, in terms of learning about money, is letting them make their decisions. So if they want to spend all their money on their Pokemon cards, or if they're going to save up for a bigger purchase, that is something that they need to learn. And we as parents need to help guide and facilitate those conversations when they say, oh, well, I haven't bought that bike yet. Well, if you haven't
Yeah.
spent money on candy and stickers and who knows what, we would have gotten there. But those are really important learning situations where we really want to put
Yeah.
our kids in. So those are some of the great ways that kids can think about money. Yeah.
Yeah. No, and there was a couple of tactics with my son, and I haven't got a clue what I'm doing, but I would always say to him, happy to buy him something for school or whatever, right? So I'd buy something for him. And I would then say, if you break it, then you will pay and replace it, right? So then
Nice.
he actually got to understand, oh, wow, if I want to drag my trainers along the floor and put holes in the toes or whatever, right?
Hmm.
Um, that I need to replace them. Or if I'm going to sit there and pull the soles of my shoes off,
Yeah.
or whatever boys do, right? Then I'm going to need to pay to replace them. And
Yeah.
then he understood, well, hang on a minute, that's $80 for a pair of shoes or whatever.
It's a lot.
And
Yeah.
and he was like, hang on a minute, I've got to work how many weekends? I've got to do what? And
Yeah.
then things like he would have $40 or whatever that he would have worked very hard to actually save up for. And he could go and spend it on whatever he wanted. But and I remember one time in the shops and he wanted two things and it came to $42. And the people I was with said, oh, just give him the $2. And I went, no, because he needs to understand he's got
Yeah.
$40, right? He
That's all
needs
you
to
can
buy
get.
things
Yeah.
within the $40. Because if he goes out to work and
Hmm.
he gets paid, I don't know, $1,000 a week. God, let's hope. And he gets paid $1,000 a week, right? Then that's what he's got to spend. Nobody's going to give him any more money. It's not going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
magically appear from somewhere. So yeah, no, I completely agree. And teaching them young that, hello, they can negotiate from the age of 4, right? They're all right.
Oh,
They're
they're
doing
so
okay,
good.
right?
Yeah.
So look, at the end of the day, yeah, no, I agree. I agree. So look, you've got the 2 books. Where can people buy the 2 books from you for what?
Yeah. You can get them anywhere you get your books.
Okay.
So whether it's Amazon, Booktopia, on at your local
Cool.
bookstore, please, go support your local bookstore is a really great place. So that's where you can get
Yeah.
both of the books. And yeah, you can follow me on any socials and learn
I see you
more.
on this. Have you got, do you have a podcast?
I do,
Or-
yeah.
Yes.
It's called the Get Rich Slow Club, and I co-host that with Tash Etchum, who
That's
is
right.
in her 20s, and having two different perspectives is really fantastic as well. So it takes me back to
Yeah.
my 20s, living a life without kids. But
Oh,
the way we manage and talk about money and investing is quite different in terms of our values and our goals. And
yeah.
it's a great beginner guide for anyone who wants to learn about investing but don't know where to start. Our first 10 episodes literally set you up so that you understand everything about what we talked about in terms of ETFs, bonds, what those different assets are, how to
Yeah.
invest, and what your risk tolerance might be, and the different things that you should consider. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Awesome. Look, thank you, Anna. It's been great talking to you.
And
It's always good
you.
talking to you. Um, and look, it is something that seriously, if you can get your finances right as a single parent, can just set you up and just reduce the worry and stress that you've got on you already with bringing your kids up and trying to keep sane, right? So, thank you. It's been great speaking to you.
Thank you. You as well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast and you would like to hear more, please hit subscribe wherever you like to hear podcasts. If you would like to support us further, share this episode with your friends and family. And finally, drop us a review on iTunes, as I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, and ideas. It all helps me to understand and produce awesome content you want to hear just like this. If you want to check out our past episodes, write to us, appear on the podcast, or for links, resources, and show notes, go to our website, www.strongsingleandhuman.com. We are also on all the usual social media platforms, Insta, Facey, and Twitter. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you back here again soon. Be kind to yourself, and remember, no one is perfect. We're all just putting one foot in front of the other and doing our best. I'm Claire Martin, and you've been listening to the Strong, Single and Human podcast.